Assalamu alaikum, Sheikh Walid.
Walaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
As we were walking down from the hotel, you mentioned it's nice and sunny today. And previously it's always been cloudy and rainy. Like, as the cameraman Rashid knows, it's been a long winter. I think this is like the first bit of sun we've had, right? For most of the so alhamdulillah, we're blessed. Sheikh, you've had many books that I've seen and looked at, but obviously you just launched this book on Futuwwah. Could you maybe speak about the title itself, like Futuwwah, what it means, where it comes from? What does it mean?
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, alhamdulillah, wa sallallahu ala nabiyyina Muhammadin wa ala alihi wa sallam. First, it's a pleasure to be on your podcast, and it's truly an honor and a privilege to be able to speak about my latest book, which is titled Futuwwah and Raising Males into Sacred Manhood. So we first start talking about the subject matter, or the first part, Futuwwah, which is an Arabic word, relates to the word fatah, which means a youthful male who's transitioning from adolescence into a greater level of maturity. And in Arabic, plural, a conglomeration of the fatah would be al-fitya, which is a word mentioned in the Quran as it relates to the companions of the cave in Surah Kaf. Fityan is also another term that is used. And this term Futuwwah is loosely translated as spiritual chivalry, sacred chivalry, was more talking about a code of conduct, a code of honor based upon intrinsic inward principles that a young man seeks to develop through mentorship, through elders, and also through their peers, that would lead one towards being an upright, chivalrous protector of their community, of their family, and in particular, showing a high degree of respect for the most vulnerable and the weakest within society, the elderly, the children, and of course a heightened level of respect for the women folk. This sums up what would be the chivalrous knight, or the fityan historically in Islam.
SubhanAllah, it's interesting. And I guess it's that transitional phase, right? It's not just balagha, it's also in the character and the growth. And I think that in between stage of, I think many people have been through balagha, and even in the book when you speak about it, you reference where actually sometimes also once you've got into manhood, but having characteristics that can still be immature or young, or childish, childlike.
Right.
When you speak about that, when you mention it in the book, it really got me thinking. Sometimes a lot of the parents, so we've done work in mosques more so for maybe the last 12 years.
Mm-hmm.
We focus mainly on the teenage group. All the mosques that we work with, they work with 14 plus boys and girls. But one thing that I find, before we get into the characteristics of Futuwwah, and I think there'll be a natural transition to that when we speak about it now, is sometimes when people have, when you're working with young people that haven't seen that,
Right.
Because a lot of the responsibilities, whilst they're within the community, they start at home. But there's a lot of teenagers that might come from single parent households. In fact, one of the youth hubs that we were running in Hackney, I think 70% of the teenagers that attended, the fathers weren't living with them.
Yeah.
So when they go through that transitional period, it's very just that, I would say the core isn't there sometimes, or it hasn't. I mean, they've got questions. It could be through trauma. It could be
Right.
through not being able to speak to someone about their emotions or their feelings or their thoughts. How would you, if we're with young people that we can see they're in that transitional phase of balagha, but they're just not able. Sometimes they're not able to understand a concept, or they're not even able to speak. How would you suggest that we address people like that, or speak to people like that?
Well, 2 points. One would be, I guess, a long-term reshaping of how we actually look at and envision what family really is supposed to be. Then the second is, besides this long-term reshaping or getting back to what traditional family really means from our perspective or our historical Islamic paradigm, then it would also be the importance of the role of community and remedial parenting, if I can use that word. So firstly, we know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the one who preserved the character of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam and instilled in him the best of characteristics, including manners. وَإِنَّكَ لَعَلَى خُلُقٍ عَظِيمٍ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala praises the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam for his character, and that was preserved. Keep in mind, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, his father passed away before he was born. Okay, then who looked after him? His grandfather, Abdul Muttalib. His grandfather, who was the male role model, then passed away when he was very young. Then who stepped in? It was his uncle, Abu Talib, who was seen as a noble within Quraysh and known predominantly for his generosity, even in Jahiliyyah, and not being a muwahid, not being a monotheist. At least that's the majority opinion, right? That he was not. He still nonetheless was a male influence. So there was a level of what we could say extended family that was understood. In Western societies, this kind of broke down when we've kind of adopted the nuclear family model away from the extended family. And then when the father is gone, then basically the mom or the mother is on her own trying to deal with raising these boys. And mothers are very important in the raising and the tarbiyah of boys, but a woman can never know how it is to live in this world as a man. She cannot teach him fully how to be a man, just as I cannot fully teach a woman how to be a woman. I've never lived in that experience. The disposition that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave us internally, though we have been created with noble fitra, noble intrinsic human nature, is not the same, right, as far as disposition. Even our brain development, like physiologically, is different between men and women, hormonal. The second point that I'll get to before you interject is the role of community. And I used to mention remedial parenting. This is where community comes in and mentorship, and why historically during the time of the Abbasiyin, when there were Futuwwah guilds in Iraq, and this has gone on throughout different Islamic civilizations. You can see this in West Africa, where there were elders who were given the responsibility within the community of almost being like surrogate fathers, and with help in the raising of these young males, and to be confidants and to help guide them. So even when the fathers were present, there was another type of father figure who would oversee not only some sort of religious tutelage, but in regard to the discipline and modeling and embodying what it means to be an upright, responsible man. And this is a community project. It's not just simply for individual households or families, but it even becomes more of a community obligation, or we can use the term fard kifaya, when we have so many households of Muslims in which men are absent, whether the father died and children are orphans, whether it's a divorcee and the father just totally neglects his children, or the third thing is fathers are working so hard trying to make ends meet in the rat race of living in the West, and to make money just to feed the family and give them a house, especially with rising inflation and economy. Definitely. That he's not even around. Maybe he's working 2 jobs, right? So then where's the male role model if the father is working and never in the home to even do any sort of tarbiyah with the sons?
Even, recently, like, some parents came to me and asked some advice. And when they were speaking, they were like, this is what we're going to do for our children. This is what we're going to do. We're going to do this, 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 and this. And straight away I said to them, I said, the minute you think that you can raise your children all by yourselves, that's like you've already failed. It's not possible to like have this ring fence and have a specific way, especially which we'll speak about later, like social media influencers and stuff like that.
Right.
It's not possible to raise your children by yourself. You have to have other people involved. And you look at from the life of all the scholars, actually, even Imam Ahmad, right? His father passed away when he was young, but his mother did her role. She took him to the teachers, and even his spiritual masters, and made sure that he had the upbringing that he needed. And even from Imam Abu Hanifa to all I think maybe all of the Imam.
Imam Shafi was sent away as a young age to be with Imam Malik. His mother sent him away.
Just sent him away. So it's even sometimes this whole idea of even it's about time and being there all the time. It's not even possible sometimes. And even just trying to have that type of balance in your life might not even be productive. And you see it like when people used to go for war, for example, they would have to leave their family for months, right? And there's famous instances with that. No, it's a really important point. You go onto their sheikh, but the first point which you were making as well, even if I think boys, they need the mothers and they need that motherly touch as well, and just for the listener as well, because the focus is about sacred masculinity. That's why we're not speaking about it so much, but I'll just make the point that even within the community, we need interaction from everyone. That's positive, inshallah. So you made 3 points. The first one, the second one was about the community raising the children. What was the third point that you mentioned, Sheikh? Sorry.
I think I only mentioned 2.
Oh, okay. No, sorry. I thought there was a third.
That's okay.
No, subhanAllah. In terms of a community, the point you mentioned was about taking a long time doing it. It shouldn't be.
But the reframing of how we actually view family, we have to decolonize how we view family, because we've taken on a lot of Western understandings of what family is, and the whole conception of the nuclear family really eroded the traditional understanding of family as extended family. And now even the nuclear family, so-called nuclear family, even that's broken down, in Western society. So it's more about re-envisioning our priorities, but even actually when we talk about family, what does that even constitute?
Yeah. Yes. So that was going to be my next question. When it comes to family from an Islamic perspective, or even community, because there's so much said about neighbors within Islam. I think you have that famous story of Talha bin Ubaidullah where he was just walking and someone that he doesn't even know comes to him and he says, I'm related to you like this. I have this financial hardship and I need your help. And Talha, he gave him the example that I just sold some land. Either you can have the money, and because the person who came to him, his issue was land related, or either I can give you the land, I can speak to the person I sold it to, and we can speak, and I can give you the land. And just imagine that with us, right? A random person we've never seen on the streets comes to us, and I have this issue. We think they're crazy sometimes. And we're like, what are you speaking about? I don't know you. But this idea of family in Islam, how would you define that yourself, Sheikh?
So we have in the Quran where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions Surah Al-Hujurat, Ya ayyuhan nas inna khalaqnakum min dhakarin wa untha wa ja'alnakum shu'uban wa qaba'ila lita'arafu inna akramakum indallahi atqakum innallaha alimun khabir. So within this framework, we see that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is addressing himself as the creator of all people. So, and that's humankind's the biggest group. Then shu'ub relates to lineage. It's normally translated as nations, but it's a group of people that are linked together based upon lineage. And then you have the qaba'il, which is normally translated as tribes. So you have ethnic groups, and then you have a tribe, which is the traditional extended family concept in the largest sense. But then you have the the grandparents on both sides, first the paternal, then maternal, husband and wife. You have the uncles and aunties on both sides, which includes cousins, and then of course the children what's inside the family. So I think it's very important for us to study the family of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. When we start with Quraysh, which was the bigger group, then he's from Bani Hashim. And then when you say from his Ahlul Bayt or his family, those in which whom sadaqah was made forbidden, right, is the family of Ja'far ibn Abi Talib, the family of Aqil ibn Abi Talib, the family of Ali ibn Abi Talib, and the family and offspring of El Abbas, the uncle of Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. This constitutes what we could say is the Prophet's family, along with Azwajun Nabi, may Allah be well pleased, and the wives of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. This is, when we talk about the Prophet's family in this scope, this is what, we're talking about and referring to. So it's not just man, woman, and child, or father, mother, and some children in one household. This is a much broader conception.
Even the breastfeeding parents of
milk mothers,
the milk mothers of the Prophet, Halima, and even their role in their life. It's even beyond the family, even the role of like the neighbors, the teachers. One of the things where I personally, I spent some time in Saudi Arabia, I spent some time in Turkey.
Okay.
Obviously was brought up in London, and even time in other countries as well. One of the things that I think is this lack of trust that we have with people. I think through the media, through just how we're raised, how we're taught, this whole idea of not trusting people, which for me personally is where I've seen a big reason for the breakdown, like of not using what you have. The other thing that, as you were speaking, that it reminded me of was just the idea of love. I think I'll be speaking about love in all the podcasts that we have actually.
Mm-hmm.
So the way I personally understand love is to be committed to someone's well-being. And that's the idea that we take. And love obviously starts for the sake of Allah first. But it's a commitment to someone's well-being. And I think sometimes if you're raising your children just by yourselves as parents, what you're almost doing is you're stopping that love that the children can get from the grandparents, that the children can get from the uncles, that they can get from the neighbors, that they can get from the shopkeeper or the Imam or whoever it might be. By you taking full responsibility and making that just your duty and no one else's, you're almost even just stopping your children or whoever you're responsible to. You're stopping them from getting love from other people actually in that process. And I really noticed it. I remember once I was in another country for Eid, and when it came to the Eid presents and the way they celebrate Eid, just the impact that everyone had on this one person, I thought, you could see how it would definitely impact someone's life. If someone is a parent, let's say they're listening to this now, and they're like, you know what, my son's like 14 years old, we've done everything we can, and you know what, he hasn't got a relationship with his uncles or his aunties or whoever that might be, and in fact, one parent that's speaking to me quite recently, their son's like a hafiz of the Quran. He even had ijazah in the Quran, in Hafs al-Asim. But he's just shut off. He's in the age of like going through balagha, like puberty, and he's not speaking to anyone. He's like, he has his own issues, whatever that might be. And the parents just can't understand. Well, when I was speaking to them, I felt like it's because of this upbringing that they maybe like that was very protective. To a parent like that who they've done everything they can do so that the children can even memorize the Quran and whatever they might think. I can't speak too much on their behalf. What type of advice would you give to a parent like that?
So there is the ideal, then there's the facts on the ground. So let me deal with those. The ideal is that to try to guide or place young men such as this who are transitioning from one stage of develop to another, to get them being under some mature male mentorship. It doesn't just simply have to be a murshid. It could be a jujitsu coach. It could be someone who is involved in physical training, but it's someone who will actually take the time to be gentle when need be, but also to be firm, to give discipline, and that this is also in a group setting in which brotherhood is cultivated, because it is a natural inclination for healthy human beings, unless they become a psychopath, that they want to be in a gathering where they have some belonging. And this is unfortunately, at least in American perspective, how many Muslims will go join gangs, because if they aren't getting that healthy association where there's some sort of mentor and some sort of brotherly love, then the head of the gang set and the other gang members will fill that void of that purpose, because everyone wants to have a sense of belonging and be part of something bigger themselves, except for absolute sociopaths, right? I said psychopaths, but sociopaths, right? The facts on the ground, however, is that in many pockets, in many areas where Muslims are at, there aren't these sorts of individuals, of people who are like practicing Muslims, who are responsible, who are elders, who are also cultivating these sorts of gatherings, which is a challenge for us to reprioritize our resources and to help cultivate more of these spaces where young men can have mentorships. And I'll say this very briefly. You mentioned that this young man is a Hafiz of Quran. I know fathers who've gotten on crack. I know fathers that have become drug dealers, right? Just sitting in front of a mu'allim or a mulvi who is just like teaching a rote memorization of Quran, and just leaving that and thinking that that's tarbiyah. That's not necessarily the case, right? We're talking about mentorship and upbringing. It's more than just rote memorization. There is the proper teacher, the person who's showing the proper empathy, right? Who will grab that young man and place their arm around time being and just listen to their problems, and to have them in a healthy environment where they actually feel a sense of belonging, and where brotherhood's being cultivated. And sometimes, frankly speaking, the ma'ad or the madrasa, where you send a young boy to learn Quran, that may not cut it. Sometimes it may, but in many cases I've seen that's not the case. So we need to rethink about how we have our spaces and our priorities. I personally, I'm not a big fan of just throwing young men just for rote memorization of Quran and thinking that suffices as tarbiyah. I'm not necessarily an advocate of that, though. Learning Quran, of course, is very important. Hifz is very important.
So one of the things we speak about in our framework is, so what young people look for in a space, like a safe space where they can be themselves, right? Is one, they're looking for autonomy. So, and that's the idea of being themselves. It's not even about doing it right or wrong. What I mean here is that even if they do something wrong, they want to be able to have the decision to do that.
Mm-hmm.
The second thing that we find that young people look for is growth. And this is why sometimes the gaming's not the issue, sometimes the gangs aren't the issue here. It's that the young people are looking for these things. So like if someone's playing a game, for example, they go up to different levels, they get different skins for their guns, or they'll be a part of a clan and they'll have different roles in that clan. If someone's in a gang, for example, the more work that they put in, right, the more respect they will get, or more street credibility they will get. So the first is this autonomy, this idea of autonomy. The third is this idea of growth, and then the third is being recognized for their growth. When you level up in a game, congratulations, or you've unlocked this, or this is how it happens. And then, that's to do with recognition. And the fourth is they have to enjoy it. Like, it has to be enjoyable. And enjoyable is not necessarily like it's fun from the perspective of like it's just for what they like, what their hobbies are, what they like. I'm not even speaking about like from a hedonistic perspective or something like that. Like someone could really enjoy climbing a mountain, right? Because the idea of just climbing and then getting to the top after everything you've been, that could be an enjoyable moment for someone as well. So these are the 4 things that we find that not just young people, everyone are looking for in spaces. I think at home it's important you build that space, but I also think for parents it's important that the community that you work in or that you live in, every space is like that, in fact. That you do your role as a parent, one, because we all have our roles, or as a responsible adult, or someone who just cares, to create more spaces, like whether it's a masjid with the work that we do, or it could be the regular football club or the boxing club.
What do you mean by being recognized? Yeah, can you define that for me? Like, what do you mean by that? Because I might be interpreting it differently from what you're saying.
Even in your book, you actually speak about it slightly, from the bit that I read. So like, if you've seen a young person has spoken, let's say a young person, let's make it actually more than that. Let's say I give this might be a boring example, but let's say the masjid needs to raise some money, and a young person's gone out and raised £300. Mm-hmm. It's important. Let's call this young man Abdullah, right? It's important that without Abdullah looking for recognition, that someone can say, Abdullah, you know what? You smashed it. You raised £300. And not just that you raised £300. You wrote a message. You passed a message on. You chased up your uncles, your aunties, and you raised £300. Like, mashallah, you smashed it. Just that even can be recognition. Or let's say someone
showing people appreciation. Yeah, la yashkurullah min la yashkur nas, hadith the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Whoever does not show gratitude for people does not truly appreciate Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So I think that's what it's showing appreciation. Okay, I got you.
Yeah, people need that in their spaces. But I want to just go back to the book a little bit. I'm just going to use my phone because I don't want to misquote it. One of the things that really stuck out to me in the first chapter of the book, at least, was from the hadith about the characteristics. And I just really would like to discuss that with you.
Bismillah.
Obviously, this is a limited podcast. There's only so much we can speak about. I would definitely recommend people just to get the book and read it. The question asked, what are the signs, i.e., as in the futuwwah of the community.
No.
And then the Prophet ﷺ said, peace be upon him, said, they are those who are truthful in speech, loyal in their oath, who fulfill their trusts, abandon lying, are merciful with the orphans, give to whomsoever asks for help, spend on the one who has, are generous with craftsmen and with guests, and the head of them is the one who is modest. I wanted to just speak about this hadith and just maybe break down each characteristic a little bit.
Yeah, so actually the first 4 characteristics have relationship, because those first 4 relate to the quality or relationship of sidq, of being truthful, right? And this is the head of the affair, and this is the foundation we're talking about of noble traits of character that should be instilled in young males, that they can grow up to be healthy men, right? And this is something that is taught verbally but also embodied. So we're talking about being truthful in speech, loyal in one's oath, or like the ahd or the amana. Abu Bakr Siddiq radiallahu anh, he famously said in his inaugural khutbah, as-sidqun amana wa kadhibu khiyana, right? That meaning that truthfulness in itself is an amana, it's a sacred trust, right? And lying or being untruthful is khiyana, is treachery, right? So keeping one's oath, fulfilling one's trust, and then abandoning lying. So all of this has a relationship to sidq. And this sidq first starts a truthfulness in the heart, right? Around one's intentions. Then we see this truthfulness then comes through the lisan of speech, of seeking to be truthful, not just the intention of being truthful, but verifying what one's saying is the truth, right? And then also through the limbs, which also includes the manner of fulfilling the oath and the trust of truthfulness in actions, right? So this is the relationship of the first four of these in regards to this hadith. Then of being a young man is the issue of, is translated, I translate as merciful, but having rahmah means more than just what we think of mercy. Like compassion is baked into this word, loving compassion. Also a sense of protection, because the word rahmah, or mercy, loosely in Arabic language, is related to the word rahim, which means the wound of the mother, right? Which is a form of protection, growth, nourishment, right? And this is how the young man is supposed to be with the orphan, which of course is of the most vulnerable in the community. Then also one's guests, and you were talking about Sahabi Jalil Talha, and how the person came that he really didn't even know, who claimed a level of like tribal affiliation, and how he just was giving him that. Well, in regards to the guests, we know even Islam that the daif, or that the guest, that he has the right of at least 3 days and nights of full hospitality. If any Muslim that comes and says, look, you know, I need some food, I need some help, that is the right of the daif. This is the hospitality of Khalilullah Ibrahim alayhi salam, and of course of the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. And then of course we have in this that, and of the head of this is something that we really need to talk about, is haya, or modesty. And we know Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam also said in authentic hadith, al-haya min al-iman, that modesty is from faith, right? And so modesty is not just simply a trait for women folk, which many times we stress. It's first modesty in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If we can't be modest in front of Allah, we're not going to be modest in front of the people, right? It's not only modesty in dress and having the outer covered is the bare minimum, but also modesty in one's dress, not to be overly showing, nor to dress in such a way to intentionally try to allure people in an inappropriate way. But it's also modesty in one's mannerisms and speech, except for when the time is needed. There's a time in which, for instance, facing an adversary in battle, then one can kind of brag and boast and to try to put down or show a level of pride over one's adversary in that particular circumstance. But otherwise, the baseline is to be modest. So we know that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he was described as being more modest than a young virgin girl, right? And he is the model of manhood, and he is the relayer of these traits of what makes a real chivalrous young Muslim man.
SubhanAllah, it's, as you were speaking, it's like so much we can do to that. Even who people take as influencers or as models, right?
Right.
To look up to is actually very far away from modesty.
Of course.
It's the opposite.
No, because they brag about how many cars they have,
Yeah.
how many Rolexes they have, how much money they have in the bank, and that is far away from modesty. That's actually fakhr, and that is that's actually an attribute of Iblis, by the way. To be prideful and boasting is actually demonic.
SubhanAllah. And like, if people do, I want to go back to the hadith, but whilst we're on this point, if you have a role model who's if in this hadith, and the head of them is the one who is modest.
Correct.
There's extra emphasis on this, right? If someone is show arrogance, boastfulness, pride, they're showing that the ego has taken them over, right? Like, is that if we look up to people like that in the online world or even in person, are these the type of people and as an example, I think we'll speak about maybe Andrew Tate, the Red Pill movement, and before I speak about Andrew Tate, you'll say, oh, he's a Muslim. Here we're speaking specifically about role models. I'm not speaking about his relationship with Allah. I'm not speaking about his judgment between him and Allah. I'm not even speaking about his private journey here. What we're speaking about here is someone being a role model, someone to be looked up to for our children, our families, even our adults. Because like one sister showed us screenshots of like the messages she was getting from brothers. She had a job and a brother at the joke said, if you did this, I'll slap you, as a joke to the sister. And she could see it. It really went back to the way that Andrew Tate was speaking as a person. What would be your personal advice before we speak to parents? Because honestly, majority of the questions I get are mainly from parents. My children watch it. I'm not really sure what to say because some stuff he says is good, and at least they have a role model, and he's telling people not to take drugs and this and that, and at least that's good. But before we speak about the parents, what would be your advice to like taking Andrew Tate or even keep on the Red Pill movement as your models?
All men, be it this brother, it could be a popular celebrity speaker, it could be a politician. The standard is the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He is the standard of what it means to be a complete human being. And in particular, his personage, he was a man, right? We're talking about the perfection of manhood. He's a standard. And whatever anyone does has to be judged by that standard. And we all should be striving towards that standard. If anyone is openly flaunting or going against that standard, then that is what we leave behind, or that which we would not take. So for instance, we mentioned that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he was modest. Number two, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he was kind to womenfolk, not just to his daughters, not just to Fatima, not just to his wives, but to the general womenfolk. And you never see him talking down to or demeaning womenfolk, even to the extent that we read narrations such as our mother Aisha, may Allah be well pleased with her, got upset one time when another wife came and brought a dish that the Prophet ﷺ liked to the house while he was hosting some of the Sahaba. She got angry and knocked over the food. He didn't say, woman, who do you think you are? You know, I'm the Prophet. What are you doing embarrassing me in front of the guests? He told the Sahaba, oh, your mother is jealous. You know, so, you know, it's a whole different framework, right? The Prophet ﷺ, every time that Fatima would come into the house, our mother Aisha narrates this, may Allah be well pleased with her, that he would stand up from his spot where he's sitting, go towards his daughter, kiss his daughter, grab her by the hand and sit her down, right? The type of like loving and affection, right? So there is no treating women like property or commodities. There is no bragging or boasting about material possessions or looking at someone as a high value person based upon how much money they make and how many women they get. In fact, the Prophet ﷺ in the authentic hadith said the actual opposite, that the person who's truly rich, nafs, is the person who has inward richness of character, right? This is what we define as a truly a wealthy person, or a person who's free of seeking the acceptance or seeking to be praised by other people. Why? because this person feels full in regards to their relationship and striving towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So I would just say the red pill movement in general, even if some things they say socially may be correct, it lacks the spiritual dimension and the metaphysical realities of Al-Habib al-Mustafa Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. And that is the problem. We are not a people of materialistic considerations. We are a people that aren't just materialistic or physical. We are people that look at the metaphysical first, then the physical. We look at the spiritual first before the material, although the material is important. And this is where the likes of this brother can't really be seen as a role model. Now, however, lakin, we should pray for the brother, hope for his development. And I say to people who want to even like cancel him and write him off, remember, Umar ibn al-Khattab, the day he accepted Islam, he wanted to kill the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And look at the maqam of Umar. Look how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala raised him up. So this brother, Mr. Tate, to my knowledge, has never committed murder. He never tortured Muslims. You know, he didn't own people as slaves, you know, to my knowledge. I mean, Omar was with, you know, Abu Jahl involved in torturing Muslims and doing this prior to Islam. Yeah. But look what became of him through the hidayah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So we pray for the brother. I pray that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala raises his rank, you know, but from what we've seen in his previous content, he's not our sheikh. And for you young brothers, he's not your sheikh. Don't look at him like that. Pray for the brother, and look to the scholars and to the upright men who have a spiritual connection and chain of transmission back to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. These are the real role models, and these are the people who are kind to the orphans, who are kind to the poor, who are modest, who prefer. Who are selfless, not selfish. They're selfless, not selfish. These are our role models.
Someone could also say that, look, like, we come from broken families, like finance is important. We need to be successful. And even in my opinion, Andrew Tate's not new. You had Grant Cardone's and people before that. The Poor Dad, Rich Dad, I think. I forgot the author's name. But someone who's like, because I also do feel, and I think you made the way you spoke about it was like, is very like balanced, but also just objective, I think. And yeah, may Allah like give hidayah to everyone, not just Andrew Tate.
I mean,
but what would you say to someone who's like, I don't have any role models? At least he speaks to me. Like, I enjoy cars, and that's just him. Maybe someone will also say he's doing that so that people actually listen. He's just speaking to human psychology. He's showing his car so that someone like me will watch the video in the first place. What would you say to that, Sheikh?
Well, okay, two things. The first thing I would say is that just because you're thirsty, be careful what water you drink. Because you could have some fresh water mixed with salt water or ocean water. If you sip a little bit of that water, it makes you more thirsty. If you drink too much of it, it'll kill you. That's my first thing. Okay, so maybe he said something that was true or something you liked. But if you're drinking the whole glass of what he's saying, and you don't have the capacity to discern the difference because you lack wisdom and you're not grounded in the Quran and the Sunnah properly, then that's not for you. The second thing is, we have people to point to who are Muslims, who are people of deen, who have courage, who display manliness, who give guidance. For instance, I mentioned this before, like, we just can't say what not to be. We point towards people. In the UK, for instance, you have someone who's involved in Futuwwah and been involved for years, Sheikh Ibrahim Osiafa, right? He's in Liverpool. He does things internationally, including like the Futuwwah retreat that's going on in Turkey this summer. He's a lion of a man. He's a lion, right? So we have people like this in our midst who aren't just groveling liberals who are compromising the deen, who speak with authority, who speak with manhood, but are coming from the tradition. We have people like this. So I point these young people, okay, I just don't say don't listen to some such and such. Normally, I don't even say that. Normally, I say this is who you listen to. I tried to invoke people's names too much, and I've been very careful not to mention this brother's name because I don't even like pointing towards them. Even if people are listening, I like to point towards people who are contemporary models that you could actually get guidance from.
I think contemporary models are really important. I think just read the seerah, listen to the seerah even. I'm not saying just listen to the seerah. You need contemporary real life experiences, which...
There's another note. Even though I was born several years later, right? But like as a teenager, Malcolm X was that type of role model for me, right? You know, so we have the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, who, you know, of course, he lived 1,400 years ago. His example is still living, but we have people closer in our current existence and lives that we can look at, not just people who may be in our midst, but even like the likes of Malcolm X. When we talk about a man, we talk about high value men, you know, he died basically penniless, but who would say that he wasn't a real man? I challenge anyone to question his manhood. He was a real man, you know, and he displayed all these things: moral uprightness, decency, truthfulness, sincerity, and courage. That's a man.
The other thing that I would also say is, one, you don't have to always like challenge yourself to read, challenge yourself to read, challenge yourself to write as well. I think it's important we speak to other people. If we don't have a process or understanding of ourselves, like if something's bothering you, if you're not sure about it, write about it, not even in search of the answer, but even just to understand what you want or what your own personal problems might be. The other thing that I would definitely advise people is, and we were speaking about social media just on our way here actually. Mm-hmm. I'm not here to say social media is good, bad, haram. That's not what I'm saying right now. But have real life interactions in your life. Have people that you can physically like say salam to. That if you are down in life, someone could not just emotionally and spiritually, but physically pick you up. You know.
Correct.
Someone that you have real interactions with. If it's one person, two people, three people. They don't need to be famous people even. They don't even need to outwardly have the answer for everything. Honestly, like for me personally, we grew up 3 doors away from the masjid. And there's certain interactions that I didn't realize at the time. I remember one uncle, he came to me and I was like practicing, and I used to do that in the masjid. And he came to me and goes, Hamza, do you know how to read, do you know the dua for janazah prayer? And I stopped. I'm like, I don't know the dua for janazah prayer. And he's like, how many janazah prayers have I seen you pray? And that for me was like a big eureka, like it was a big thing in my life. But this was just an uncle who couldn't even speak English properly. He was the first, and he also had this, he said to me, he goes, now people are LIFO, they're last in, first out when it comes to the masjid. They come just in time for the takbirah, the takbirah, or they'll miss the first rak'ah, but they'll come just in time and they'll be the first out. And he said, no, but you should be the first one in. And even after Fajr, the Prophet was sitting in his place until sunrise.
Correct.
And this was just an uncle who would speak to me like that. And that gave me a grounding that carried me to my current life now.
MashaAllah.
And this was maybe when I was like 15, 16. Like 14 years ago. So yeah, I think parents, if they have children, if you're a young adult yourself, try and find real life people. People aren't perfect, but find real life people that will have a positive impact in your development as well. The other thing that I think personally is like if you're not sure about something, if you don't know, you should go to people that you know. So separate to role models, it's important that you have someone in your life that has scholarly understanding. It could be a local Imam, it could be someone in the local area. That could even be through online, someone you have a personal relationship with.
Correct.
But have someone you can ask questions to, and that you can trust, you can see the character. Because not all role models, you might want to ask them something like I spoke about before, but specifically someone that you can actually go to and be like, I'm seeing this, forget about names for a second, it can be any issue. This is what I'm struggling with, these are the thoughts I'm having. And yeah, just ask them, have someone you can ask. And whilst we advise that to young people, maybe parents for their children, then my advice would also be, because we train mosques, we train hubs, that's what we do as an organization, is also, if you are a person of knowledge, if you have something to give people, you have to make yourself accessible. Because by you not making yourself accessible, then people will get confused by different role models, whoever they might be. That would be my 2 pence to add to the points that you made, Sheikh. Now honestly, I think your points were really like to the point in that. But I wanted to go back to the beginning of that hadith. You mentioned the first 4 points. They speak about truthfulness. In fact, when the Prophet ﷺ, when different people came to the Prophet ﷺ and asked about their weaknesses or something they're struggling with, you won't find the Prophet ﷺ said, that's it, you're going to burn in hell, or you're this, you're that, you're this. Sometimes the Prophet ﷺ, he said, follow up a bad deed with a good deed. And then sometimes the Prophet ﷺ, even the famous hadith where the person has 3 problems, I forgot which ones they were at the top of my head, so I won't, maybe you can remember it, Sheikh. And the Prophet ﷺ said, just be truthful, like, don't lie. And he came back to the Prophet ﷺ the next day, and the Prophet ﷺ asked him how was he doing. And I think the final one was stealing. He said the first 2 issues, which I can't remember right now what they were, and he said, I stopped them. And the Prophet ﷺ said, try and find a halal means of income, basically, and until he was able to even stop stealing. But this idea of truthfulness, authenticity, being yourself, being happy in who you are for yourself, obviously for the sake of Allah, that's a given. How important is that?
Well, it's important for all of us. It's important for those who are older and mentors, as well as for the younger people, to strive to this and level of like being truthful and transparent and feeling that one will be able to give you sound advice and guide you without condemning. So the best example I can give is the narration when we have that says that a young man came to Rasulullah ﷺ and said, give me permission to commit zina. Now imagine the level of trust and the level of comfort he had with Rasulullah to even pose that question. Imagine today the average young man who's struggling with sexual desire going to the average Imam these days and saying, oh, Imam, I'm attracted to these women, I want to commit zina. Can I commit zina? You know. And Rasulullah ﷺ gave him a reply, speaking to his moral conscience, and then made dua for him, right? And that was the position, and that was the remedy and the cure for that young man. So, number one, that young man trusted Rasulullah ﷺ. And then also, he was transparent to come to Rasulullah ﷺ and articulate his true feelings. And of course, with the hadith, al-majalisu bil amana, that the gatherings are a sacred trust, meaning that there has to be the surety of like what you say between the elders stays between you two. That it's not going to be broadcast to the public, right? That it's not going to be a source of, I mean, forget social media, just the old school gossiping. Oh, you know, such and such, is doing this or doing that, right? So this is the importance of truthfulness, authenticity, and transparency. And we see this with this young Sahabi and Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam.
Even Yusuf alayhi salam, when he was in prison, when he speaks the fact that people could trust him with his dreams.
Yeah.
Like, who do you go to speak to him about dreams, right? It's going to be someone you trust. Even with Yusuf, you can see it, that he lived a very spiritual life. He was obviously a prophet, right? And people trusted to speak to Yusuf alayhi salam about their dreams as well. You were speaking about sports and the importance to be strong, right? I'd like to speak to you about that a little bit more, about the importance of strength. So growing up, we all did boxing. That was our sports. I remember someone said, "Oh, boxing's haram. You can't do boxing. See, it's hitting in the head." Then later on, I read and I spoke to some scholars that I trust. Like, if you're training and you've got headgear on, it's fine. And it's in fact it's encouraged. And there was, like, when the Sahaba were training, you can't point a sharp object at your brother, right? But obviously when they were training, they had to do that. And so we started doing that again. How important is physical growth, but not just as physical for the sake of a physical skill, but how it also affects your other aspects of your life, your confidence, your ability to think, to even understand things, to even deal with your emotions, how it affects you spiritually as well. How important is physical growth?
So Jalaluddin Suyuti, rahimahullah ta'ala, compiled a book on the hadith about the wrestling of the Prophet ﷺ and the Sahaba, right? So this whole issue of physical fitness, and even we could say martial arts, is something that's actually prophetic. So a couple of points. Number one, young men should be active and to be able to channel that young energy in a healthy way, right? Number two, these sorts of activities help develop discipline, right? Number three, young men have to go through some sort of rigor in order to be real men. And with this also helps with the ego, because when you get into the ring or you work out, and I did martial arts when I was younger, you're going to get tossed from the mat. You may get the wind knocked out of you, and you have to learn how to get back up. And this helps, with the ego, right, or with the nafs. So these are very important exercises. The Prophet ﷺ also had told the Sahaba, may Allah be pleased with them, in regards to teaching their young men how to do archery. They learned equestrianism, how to horseback ride, right? So physical fitness was something that was encouraged, and it should be bred. However, the Prophet ﷺ said that the one who is strong, or the strong man, is not the one who's strong in wrestling. He's not the one in martial arts who can flip people in judo and jujitsu and karate kick people, knock them out MMA. No. He said the one that's strong is the one who is strong and able to control their ghadab, right? To control their anger, to control their rage. It's self-mastery. It's strength of controlling one's nafs. That's real strength. The physical strength is important. But he said that's not who the qawi, that's not who the real strong man is. Because obviously in that time, as in today, there was this ideal that the one who was strong, who was the real valiant person, or the one who was the real warrior that looked it up, that was the one who could beat everyone up. And that's not the prophetic standard.
Allahu Akbar. We're coming to a close of the podcast. I want to ask you so much more questions.
Yeah.
But I guess we have a link for the book,
yeah,
where people can purchase the book. for that, inshallah, where people can read about it more. You speak about it in your book. The final like point I want to speak to you about before we conclude. In your book, there's a chapter on a spiritual sort of guide being separate. What makes a spiritual guide? So maybe if you could answer this question in two ways, in terms of what should you look for in a spiritual guide? Who is a spiritual guide? And then the second answer to maybe think about is, if you want to be a spiritual guide to someone, if you are a spiritual guide, what does that responsibility look like? Because I think, because fathers, I'm sure will listen to this as well, because I think part of that spiritual guide, that responsibility, whilst you have it outside of the house as well, and we spoke about that earlier, that the level of the spiritual guidance that a father just has to do in certain moments. But yeah, speak about, if you don't mind, speaking about just being a spiritual guide and what that means.
So just between being a murshid or a sheikh and a spiritual guide from that perspective, and a general mentor who is still a positive role model. If you're talking about a complete sheikh or a murshid, this person should be a scholar of the outward and the inward. And of these people we call al-ulama al-amilin, right? It's the people who are the scholars, but not just in information, but they are scholars because they put their knowledge into action. So it's also in their character. Because you have many people who are knowledgeable, but real ilm is about transformation. Knowledge without transformation is just information, right? It's supposed to, so you see it in the person's character. Just between information and knowledge that brings transformation. Okay, so this is one who is a scholar of the inward and the outward, such as Musa alayhi salam in Surah Al-Kahf. He actually asked specifically and asked someone to be his spiritual guide. And we know this person is Al-Khidr alayhi salam, right? So just keep that in mind. A prophet of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, as a young man, actively sought out a spiritual guide, right? So who are we? We're not prophets, but we think that we can just do this on our own. That's foolish. If one doesn't have such a person close by in their proximity or locality, they should look for someone who is an elder that they see of upright character, that they know not to have any scandal, and someone who is striving as a practicing Muslim. At least outwardly, you see them fulfilling their fard ayn, their individual obligations, right? So this can be a football coach, it could be a jiu-jitsu teacher, and of course, inside the household, we all have this job of being the foremost people of trying to guide and teach our children, starting with adab, because adab, manner, starts before ilm. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said in the Quran, Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu ku anfusakum wa ahlikum nara. O you who believe, guard yourselves or save yourselves and your family from the fire. And Ali ibn Abi Talib, may Allah ennoble his countenance, he said that you instill in them discipline and manners and then teach them sacred knowledge. So manners and adab comes first, and this first showing of proper manners and adab is supposed to come from the home first. Now obviously sometimes we know it's absent from the home, but then this is where we have mentors that come to help with adab.
No, I really appreciate that. Honestly, I wish I could have you for another 5 hours, Sheikh.
Yeah.
Thoroughly enjoyed this discussion.
MashaAllah.
May Allah bless you.
Ameen.
May Allah put barakah in your time here.
Ameen.
May Allah accept it from you and shower you in His mercy.
Ameen.
With that, I think we come to an end of the podcast. So thank for your time. For just everyone that's listening, again, please check the description of this video below. Please check the description below. We'll have the links for maybe the Sheikh's book on Futuwwah, but also the Sheikh's other books that mainly revolve around blackness in Islam, that I think are very important for us to read as well. The Sheikh's been off social media, which we didn't have the time to speak about. Maybe that's for another day. But
I have a Telegram, so if you want to follow me on Telegram, you can do that.
Yeah, so I'll have the link for the Telegram, inshallah. With that, Jazakallah khairan. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum salam.